So ICE have killed another two individuals in the space of the last week. And as usual on Newsnight with Abby Phillip, MAGA Republicans will still come on and still defend what most people would refer to as the indefensible. In this clip, we see MAGA loyalist Joe Borelli trying to defend ICE in the midst of the two murders that have taken place. But when Abby Phillip asks him one question, his entire argument just completely falls apart. Let's watch the clip in full, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts towards the end. And if you're not subscribed, please consider subscribing. We just under 10,000 short of hitting 100,000 subscribers. Let's get into it.
Good evening. I'm Abby Phillip in New York. Tonight, after two deadly ICE-involved shootings and countless questions, the Department of Homeland Security is making changes to its immigration policies. First, ICE is pausing most traffic stops. And second, each ICE arrest team plans to have one agent wearing a body camera. Now, the changes are coming after a week in which ICE officers in Texas killed Lorenzo Salgado Araujo. He's a Mexican immigrant. Days later, in the state of Maine, an agent killed Joan Sebastian Duran Guerrero, who was from Colombia. Now, neither men were targets of the ICE operations, and agents did not have body cameras in either of those incidents. Protests are now erupting across the country, and memorials are growing in Houston. Salgado Araujo's son visited the spot where his father died. And in Biddeford, Maine, a witness told Portland Herald that after she heard the gunshots yesterday, she saw a man on the ground and she heard cries from a family, including a child. That witness says that the child couldn't have been more than 3 years old. She was still dressed in her bluey pajamas. People are now leaving bluey-themed stuffed animals to remember her father. Now, before we open it up to the conversation here at the table, I do want to invite you to join us at home. Head to cnn.com/Abby and you can weigh in. We'll get to some of your comments throughout the show. But just to, underscore how unusual and really significant it is that ICE has, as a result of both of these really tragic incidents, they've changed their policy. And frankly, it's a policy that has been problematic from the beginning. In both of these incidents, ICE officers appeared to shoot the driver of a moving vehicle. And in both incidents, it was not someone that they were looking for.
Yeah, and it's not just a Mexican immigrant, the one that died last week in Houston. Lorenzo Salgado Araujo is a father, a husband, a hardworking man who had been in this country for 35 years, who was on his way to work when he was incorrectly targeted. They were targeting somebody else. And it's kind of amazing that given that case just a few days ago, within 7 days, we see it happen again in Maine. With this time, it was a Colombian immigrant, Joan Sebastian Guerrero. His 3-year-old was in the car wearing her little pink backpack. She saw 5 bullets pumped into her father's head. They dragged him out of the car. They handcuffed a dead man as his bloodied head hit the pavement. And then we see this pattern over and over with ICE, right? Where they pretend that these people weaponize their cars, despite the fact that we see the video and we know that that's not true, where they are targeting the wrong people. Neither of these two had criminal records. And most of the people that are getting detained and deported by ICE, and by most, I mean over 70%, don't have any criminal record. And so supposedly there have been policy changes after Minnesota, when we saw 2 blonde, blue-eyed U.S. citizens killed in the streets of Minneapolis. And now, months later, it's happening again. Yeah, and feels, you know what it feels like for a person of color, for Latina immigrant? It feels like we are being hunted down by our government with impunity and absolutely zero accountability.
So, to Anna's point, the issues with these types of vehicular stops have been there for a long time. And in fact, in this main incident, they said that he was shot because there was a perceived threat to public safety. There's not a lot of information to support that. But one thing that is a threat to public safety is a moving vehicle with a deceased driver in it, which is one of the reasons that you really don't shoot and kill the person driving a moving car. So where is the accountability and even acknowledgement that there's a problem here from just a straight policing perspective?
Well, I think the acknowledgement is pretty clear. They've paused traffic stops, at least temporarily, and we'll see how long that lasts. I think every stop is different, I think. But one thing that should be the same, they should all be wearing body cameras. And I know that the provisions have been made to send them body cameras. I know they're going to have at least one body camera on every team. I can't help but think that the repeated shutdowns of the Department of Homeland Security caused a delay in getting these things deployed. But no matter, body cameras here would help the public a tremendous amount. Now, in the case of Maine, there is no video. There is at least one witness who says the person disobeyed repeated commands to stop, but we don't really know. And so I hesitate to jump to conclusions on it, other than to say this: every loss of life in any of these interactions is extremely regrettable. And it's not anything any of us should wish for. But figuring out what happened after the fact should be a lot easier than it is, and it would be made easier if the body cameras were deployed.
Scott, there is some video, and there's also eyewitnesses who witnessed the driver saying, "I tried to stop." Eyewitnesses who saw the little 3-year-old in the back of the car. I mean, you are a father. The idea that this 3-year-old is going to have to live the rest of her life with the image of her father's bloodied head because these ICE officers shot straight into this car. You see the bullets in the windshield and killed her father in front of her with her in the back seat. Is outrageous that is happening in the United States of America.
I think all of this was actually preventable. I've been working on police reform issues since I came out of law school. We've known body cameras are not the final solution, but when I was at the White House and Michael Brown was murdered or Philando Castile was murdered, Philando Castile's child also saw him murdered in cold blood by a police officer. And body cameras should have been implemented if you're going to deploy law enforcement. Well, I struggle to even call ICE law enforcement, but deploy ICE into communities at an aggressive rate in which they did, having quotas. This was avoidable, but this was an overreach. This was a go round folks up. And quite honestly, I do think from the top down, from Donald Trump to the Supreme Court, to Kristi Noem, to Mark Wayne Mullum, to Tom Holman, there has been this guilty until presumed innocent. And that is not actually how this country works when it is dealt with Black folks, but also now that it is brown people and this immigrants' rights justice.
And to talk about Kristi Noem, and we talk about Greg Bovino, remember him, there was also this idea right after January that this was a leadership issue. It was the way that Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski, it was the environment and the culture that had manifested in DHS. And so you cut off the snake's head, you send her off to be a special envoy wherever, and you bring in somebody else, and now we will see a culture change. But when you try to amass this many officers in such a short amount of time, and then you set these goals of 2,000 per day, these situations are going to keep happening. I think it's really going to be up to Mark Wayne Mullin to figure out a way to...
The other thing I'll just say about that, just real quick, is that we were also told that these things were happening in blue states because Tim Walz or the governor or the mayor in Minneapolis wouldn't help them. This also happened in Texas. So this is not about where these things are happening. This is about the policy that is being implemented by this government is aggressive and will cause people to lose their lives.
It is actually an important point because in Texas, it wasn't just that it happened in Texas. It happened in coordination with local law enforcement.
Exactly,
And it still didn't make them more accurate in terms of who they were targeting. It still didn't make it so that the actual practice of what they were doing in that moment was something that was in the interest of public safety. So it does kind of undermine that argument.
Look, you mentioned people shouldn't be presumed guilty before they're proven guilty. And I think that goes two ways. I think that also goes for law enforcement officers who more often than not are involved, when they are involved in shootings, are justified shootings. The minority of cases of police-involved shootings are criminal or done against policy. That said, when you have two incidents like this in a week, both related to a traffic stop and the perception that there was some threat of physical violence from the car itself, certainly there needs to be some sort of policy change or an investigation. I think Holman's doing the right thing by pausing this in the interim while they can staff up on body cameras while they can review the changes, because that's the right thing to do. We also can't pretend like this is something that only existed in the Trump administration. There were police-involved shootings during the Biden administration, and I pulled one of the more controversial ones. It was in Provo, Utah in 2023, and I looked at what happened. It was the same policy being followed where the FBI took the lead on the investigation first and then allowed the local Utah Attorney General and other law enforcement agencies to follow suit. So what's happening right now is following the precedent of previous law enforcement police-involved shooting investigations, and we should let that play out. If the cops are guilty, I just want to be clear, if they're guilty of something wrong, I think they should be punished.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think we ought to know who the officers were who were involved in this?
I'm sure we will. I mean, this.
You're sure we will? Because we still don't know who was involved in either of the incidents in Minneapolis. So it's been 7-8 months.
If there is a criminal indictment of these officers, yes, I think their names should be public, just like
again,
everyone else.
Same question. I mean, you're saying just let the process play out. It's been 7 months. We don't know. We don't have a name. Just going back to Minneapolis, no name, no sense that there's been any report done about what happened here. No actual, thorough investigation. There's been nothing.
Inconsistency in stories. I think to your point, Joe, yes, let the investigation play out. But the distrust that is being built in this country right now because of the inconsistencies from the people that should be actually doing the investigation gives us great alarm.
We haven't seen the eyewitness statements from the officers. We've had a statement from the DOJ. We had a statement from CBP and ICE, et cetera. We've only heard the eyewitness statements, and I have no reason to doubt them. I'm not going to prejudge them. Maybe they're accurate. But we only have those statements from the witnesses who were in the car with the victims.
Yeah, it's on the government to get us the eyewitness statements from their officers.
It's not the government's role to meet the media's need. It's the government's role to meet the investigators' need, not to appease the people at the table.
We actually want to know what they say happened.
We don't want to
appease people on political panels on TV. Aren't getting anything.
But this is our government. But they actually do answer to me. Actually, I'm a voter. I'm a citizen in this country and a taxpayer.
The proceedings of a grand jury, in all cases, are secretive and deliberative. Right?
But we're not just some willy-nilly observers.
It is not the priority of an investigation to make sure people on TV
who's going to proceed to a grand jury?
And just one last point.
Joe, you think Donald Trump's DOJ is going to do a grand jury investigation?
They're following the same protocols that were in place during the Biden administration, during Trump 1, during the Obama administration.
Here's what's different about this.
Shootings have not changed.
Time and time again, we have seen incidents. I remember being on this panel with Scott, and I remember you having a very strong reaction to a case that happened where there was supposedly a Venezuelan immigrant that had pounded an immigration agent with a shovel. Mm-hmm. That's what immigration told us. That's what ICE told us. And months later, the truth came out and video came out, and that had not been that was not what happened.
Actually, it wasn't months later; it was days later, And I think that particular incident, and I think we talked about it here, that was extraordinarily damaging because the statements of the officers in that case that came out right away were absolutely not true. Now, what also happened is the Department of Homeland Security and the White House immediately acknowledged it. They said it was a lie, and they said they were moving on disciplinary and I think other actions against the officers, which was also the right thing to do. But to Joe's point, just because this happened, and it is extremely regrettable when anyone dies, taking the side against the police officer in every single case is not right. They do have a right here. They have rights too. The people involved have rights. Everybody here has rights, but that doesn't stop at the cops. They have rights, and they're in a very difficult situation.
I think that's right, but you have to acknowledge that, let's think back to Minnesota, for example. The White House and the administration prejudged those cases. Yeah. They made it very clear they were not going to investigate, that the victims were perpetrators. So they prejudged those cases. And I think that's one of the reasons why there is so much of a push for more accountability, because they stay silent and then they denigrate the victims, and they don't provide the other side of the story so that the evidence can speak for itself.
That's more than just make statements that could be diminishing to the victims. They tell lies. They actually say things and then they immediately contradict themselves. And I do think we need to be able to hold our appointed, confirmed cabinet secretaries to a standard that they are truthful to the American people when a citizen or a human is murdered because of the policies they have put in place. And I don't feel like we get that from this current administration.
All right. We'll leave that there. Next for us.
So, quite interesting. First and foremost, let's start with Scott Jennings, and then I'm going to move on to Joe Borelli. The thing that it is that Ashley Ellison just said at the end there is that, and I've literally, as I was watching the clip myself, I was literally urging someone on the panel to point this out and highlight it. The problem with this administration is not just that, you know, they will manipulate things, but these guys will flat out lie. They will. So when Joe and Scott Jennings are saying that, you know, we should allow the things to play out, well, the evidence that it is that we have of this administration is that they are willing to lie to keep themselves looking in the best way that it is that they possibly can to the public. We've seen it. We've seen it with Alex Pretty being murdered, and we've seen it multiple times. This administration will lie. So unfortunately, with that information in mind, that's how it is that we have to look and we have to think and feel until actual facts and actual evidence comes out. We also know that this administration are willing to cover up. They are willing to cover things up as well. We've seen it. Renee Good, Alex Pretty, we've seen the cover-ups, people not being held accountable. And Anna Navarro is 100% right. It does look like to people that are black and that are brown, especially obviously in this case with the last two murders, you know, people within the Latino community, that they are being hunted down. Because how is it that two murders take place within a 7-day period and none of the individuals that were murdered were the initial targets? How does that happen? That just means that these people are just being stereotyped and as a result are ending up dead. This is what the problem is. But it all comes back to Stephen Miller and these quotas that it is that are being put out. X amount of people need arresting per day. The issue and the problem with that is then you get incidents like this. Then you get incidents that are taking place. People who aren't even targeted being killed. Even if it was the person that you are targeting, it shouldn't end in loss of life. But this is what will continue to happen. And nobody will be held accountable for it. This is the world that it is that we're living in today. This administration are a joke. Let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comment section below. Who do you agree with? Do you agree with people that are pro-ICE, or do you agree with people who are against what ICE are currently doing? Let me know down below. And while you guys are here, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. As I said at the top of the show, we are less than 10,000 subscribers away from 100,000. Help us to be able to get there. Appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys in the next clip.